It was a bright, busy afternoon when the delivery boy stepped out of his small motorbike and walked toward the large event hall. The building looked impressive, with shiny glass doors and expensive decorations that made him pause for a moment. He had delivered many orders before, but this place felt different. Inside, people in elegant dresses and sharp suits moved quickly, talking, laughing, and sipping drinks. It was one of those high-class events he had only ever seen from the outside. He took a deep breath, adjusted his uniform, and reminded himself to stay professional. This was just another delivery, nothing more. He carried a small package carefully, stepping lightly on the polished floor. The noise from the outside street faded away, replaced by soft background music and the hum of conversations. It was quiet at first until a few guests noticed him. Some of them, standing near a grand piano in the corner of the room, started whispering and pointing. The piano itself looked old but well maintained, its black surface polished so perfectly that it reflected the lights from the chandelier above. It gave the impression of elegance and history, a kind of instrument that belonged in concerts, not party corners. A young man in a suit leaned over and whispered to a friend. "I bet this guy doesn't even know how to touch a piano," he said with a small smirk. Another laughed, and soon a few more joined in, curious to see if their joke would get a reaction. The delivery boy overheard parts of their conversation. At first he ignored it. He had been judged like this many times before, and he had learned not to react. Still, a small part of him felt a twinge of something familiar nervousness. Yes, but also a spark of excitement. One of the guests, more confident than the others, called out, "Hey, delivery boy! Can you play the piano? Let's see what you've got." There was laughter. The group looked at each other, clearly expecting him to refuse or make a funny excuse. The delivery boy stopped for a moment, holding the package tightly. Everyone thought he would turn and walk away, embarrassed by the attention. But he didn't. Instead, he took a slow step toward the piano. The room seemed to change the moment he got closer. People continued talking at first, but the whispers started to die down as he approached the instrument. He looked at it carefully. He had seen pianos before, and he had played them often, but not like this one. It was perfect, almost inviting him to sit down. He set the package on a nearby table and took a seat on the piano bench. His hands hovered over the keys for a moment, as if feeling the weight and temperature of the wood. The guests watched with curiosity, still unsure if this was a joke or something real. Some of them leaned against the walls, crossing their arms, waiting for him to fail. Others whispered to each other, already forming opinions. "He looks too nervous," one said. "This is going to be funny," another added, but the delivery boy didn't focus on their whispers. His mind went back to a time when music had been everything in his life. As a child, he had loved playing the piano. He spent hours practicing, learning the notes, and dreaming of performing in front of an audience. But life had been difficult. His family needed money, and he had to help. The piano had been put aside, replaced by deliveries, long hours, and responsibilities he could not avoid. He had almost forgotten how it felt to play in front of people, yet that old excitement returned now. Stronger than before, he placed his fingers gently on the keys. The room became quieter. Some people noticed, others still laughed quietly, but the energy was changing. There was something calm, yet confident about the way he sat. He didn't rush. He didn't try to impress. He just allowed himself to remember, to feel the connection between his fingers and the keys. For a few moments, nothing happened. People began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. The laughter had faded. One guest whispered, "Is he really going to play?" Others leaned forward slightly, curiosity overtaking amusement. The delivery boy closed his eyes for a second, recalling the notes and melodies he had loved as a child. Memories of quiet afternoons spent at the piano, lost in music, filled his mind. Then, very softly at first, he played a single note. It was simple, clear, and pure. The note echoed slightly in the room. Some guests blinked, surprised. They hadn't expected that. He played a few more notes, carefully, building a small melody. The sound was not loud or showy, but it carried weight, precision, and emotion. The whispers of doubt slowly faded into silence. Everyone started listening. He remembered a piece he had always loved, a melody that had stayed with him through hard times. His fingers moved more confidently now, tracing the patterns he had memorized long ago. The music filled the room, soft at first, then growing in depth and feeling. It was no longer just a delivery boy playing a piano. It was a person expressing a lifetime of emotions, hopes, and memories through each note. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. They had been ready to laugh, to make fun, and now they felt awkward. A few even looked guilty for judging him so quickly. The music had changed something in the room. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, but it was real, honest, and powerful. You could feel it. People who had been talking now stopped. People who had been checking their phones now looked up. The energy had shifted from playful mockery to quiet amazement. As he continued to play, the delivery boy's mind focused entirely on the music. He wasn't thinking about the audience, the event, or the jokes. He was thinking about every note, every movement of his fingers, every emotion he wanted to share. The piano seemed to respond to him, almost like an old friend, supporting and guiding him. The room was silent except for the music, and it seemed to stretch time, making the moments feel larger than they were. By the time he finished the short piece, a strange stillness filled the room. No one clapped immediately. People looked at each other, unsure what to do. The delivery boy simply closed the piano lid gently, stood up, and turned slightly toward the guests. He didn't smile or speak. He just stood there, calm and humble, waiting for their reaction. Then, slowly, someone clapped. One hand, then another. Within seconds, the whole room erupted in applause. People were smiling, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some laughed softly, but now it was laughter of amazement, not mockery. The delivery boy's eyes widened slightly, but he kept his composure. He had expected no recognition, no applause, yet the reaction was genuine and overwhelming. A few guests approached him cautiously. "That was incredible," one said. Another whispered, "I didn't expect that at all." A couple of people even apologized quietly for their earlier jokes. He nodded politely, accepting their words without arrogance. Inside, though, he felt a quiet pride. He hadn't played to impress anyone. He had played because he could, because music was still a part of him. Even after all these years of deliveries and hard work, for the first time that day, he allowed himself to breathe deeply, to enjoy the moment. The room that had seemed intimidating and judgmental now felt different. It felt warm, alive, and human. People weren't just guests at an event. They were witnesses to something unexpected, something real. And he had shared it without pretense, without showing off. Just by being himself and letting the music speak, he walked back to pick up the package, still feeling the echo of the notes in his mind. People watched respectfully now, no longer with judgment but with curiosity and admiration. As he left the room, he realized something important. Even in a world that often judged quickly, even when life forced him to hide his talents, he could still shine in small moments. Sometimes it just took one unexpected opportunity, one small challenge, to remind the world and himself of what he was capable of. The delivery boy mounted his motorbike, holding the package carefully, and smiled softly. Today had started like any other delivery day, but it had ended differently. He didn't know what would happen next, whether anyone would ask him to play again or whether his life would change because of this one moment. But for now he carried a quiet, confident knowledge. Talent and passion don't disappear, and sometimes the smallest challenge can reveal the greatest surprises. As he rode away from the event hall, the echoes of the piano seemed to follow him. He didn't need applause or recognition to feel proud. The music had reminded him of who he was, and that feeling pure, simple, and human was more valuable than anything else. After leaving the event hall, the delivery boy rode through the busy streets, the city buzzing around him. Cars honked, people hurried past, and the smell of street food filled the air. But his mind wasn't on the noise or the traffic. It was on the piano, on the music he had just played, and on the reactions of the people in that grand room. He felt a strange mix of pride, surprise, and a little nervousness. He had not expected anyone to take him seriously, yet for a few minutes, He had been the center of attention, not because of his uniform or the package he carried, but because of his music. When he reached the small apartment he shared with his family, he parked his motorbike carefully and carried the packages inside. His mother was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, while his younger sibling played quietly on the floor. The apartment was modest, with old furniture, peeling paint on the walls, and the constant hum of life in a crowded neighborhood outside. Despite the simplicity, it was full of warmth, love, and support. His mother looked up from her cooking, noticing his tired but thoughtful expression. "You seem deep in thought," she said gently. "Everything okay?" He smiled softly and shook his head. "Just a long day," he said, trying not to give too much away. He didn't want to worry her or make it seem like something extraordinary had happened. After all, it had only been a small moment at a party, and he was just a delivery boy. But inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that the day had changed something. After finishing his delivery rounds, he often found himself reflecting on the path that had brought him here. Music had been his first love, something he had spent countless hours practicing since childhood. He remembered the afternoons when the sun streamed through the windows of his old music school, his fingers moving over the keys, learning melodies and harmonies that seemed to make the world disappear. Music had been a place of comfort, a safe haven when life felt difficult or uncertain, but life had not made it easy. His family had faced financial struggles for years, and the responsibility had fallen on him to help. He had taken jobs wherever he could find them, small deliveries, odd errands, and long shifts that left him exhausted. The piano, once so central to his life, had been pushed aside. The music room he had practiced in as a child was now empty, the keys gathering dust. For a long time, he thought his dreams were something he had to leave behind. Yet, even with all that, the love for music never left him. It lingered quietly, like a flame waiting for the right moment to burn again. That moment, it seemed, had arrived at the event hall earlier that day. The laughter of the guests, the playful challenge, it had been a test, and somehow he had passed. For a few minutes, he had reclaimed a part of himself that he had feared lost forever. Sitting in his small apartment, he replayed the scene in his mind. The polished piano, the surprised faces, the sudden silence when his first notes filled the room, it all felt surreal. He could almost hear the echo of the final chord, soft and lingering, leaving a sense of awe in its wake. It was a memory he would carry for a long time, a reminder that talent and passion could never truly disappear, no matter how life forced you to set them aside. His mother called him for dinner, and he joined his family at the small table. The aroma of simple, home-cooked food filled the room. As they ate, his sibling chatted about school, and his mother shared stories of her day. He smiled and nodded, participating in the conversation, but his mind wandered. He thought about what the people at the event hall might think if they knew his full story, the years of practice, the sacrifices, the long hours spent balancing work and dreams. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine a future where music was not just a memory. What if there was a way to play more often? What if people could see him not as a delivery boy, but as someone capable of creating beauty, of touching hearts through sound? The thought was exciting, almost frightening, because it suggested possibilities he had never considered before. Later that evening, he sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. The sounds of life outside were quieter now, distant conversations and footsteps blending into a soft background hum. He thought about the delivery he had made, the challenge he had faced, and the music that had flowed from his fingers. It was a small moment, yes, but it had stirred something powerful within him, a reminder that he was more than his job, more than the uniform he wore, more than the life circumstances that had shaped him. He remembered the expressions of the guests, the way their laughter had turned to silence and then to applause. He thought about the surprise in their eyes, the respect that had replaced judgment. It was a strange and humbling feeling to realize that people could see something in you that you sometimes forget exists yourself. It was a lesson in patience and perseverance and in the quiet power of doing what you love, even when the world doubts you. The next morning, the routine continued. He delivered packages, navigated busy streets, and greeted customers with polite smiles. But something had changed inside him. Each step felt lighter, each interaction more meaningful. He carried the memory of the piano with him, a secret warmth that no one else could see, but that filled him with energy. The world around him remained the same, the crowded streets, the noisy traffic, the constant demands, but he felt different. He felt capable of more. During a break between deliveries, he passed by a small music shop. The display in the window caught his eye, a sheet of piano music, slightly worn but beautiful. He stopped for a moment, staring at the notes. It reminded him of the melodies he had learned as a child, of hours spent practicing scales, of the joy of creating sound from silence. He smiled, realizing that music was never really gone, it had always been inside him, waiting for a moment like yesterday to come alive again that evening. After finishing his work, he returned home and sat at a small, old keyboard his family had. It wasn't the grand piano from the event hall, but it was enough. As he played, he felt a flow of memories and emotions, soft, gentle, and healing. The notes reminded him of who he was, of the dreams he had set aside, and of the promise he could still fulfill. The music was his alone, yet it connected him to a world that sometimes seemed distant and unreachable. He thought about the people at the event hall, their surprise and admiration. He didn't play to impress them, yet their reactions showed him that what you do with your talent matters, even if the world doesn't always notice at first. It was a lesson he had learned slowly, through years of struggle and silence. And now, after a single unexpected moment, he understood it clearly. The gift you carry inside is powerful, and it deserves to be shared. The delivery boy's life remained the same in many ways. Bills still needed to be paid, deliveries still had to be made, and responsibilities still weighed heavily. But something intangible had shifted. He had been reminded that passion cannot be buried, that talent cannot be hidden forever, and that a single opportunity, even one given as a joke, can reveal truths that change everything. Over the next few days, he found himself thinking more about music. He began to hum melodies quietly as he worked, tapping rhythms on his packages, imagining harmonies that filled the air. The memory of the event hall, the polished piano, and the stunned audience stayed with him, a quiet inspiration that nudged him forward. It reminded him that even in a world that often overlooked people like him, there were moments when brilliance could shine through, unasked and unexpected. He also noticed small changes in how people treated him. Some regular customers smiled a little brighter, some colleagues seemed to respect him more, though no one knew the full story. It was as if the music he had shared had created ripples beyond the room where he had played. And although he never sought recognition, it felt good to realize that a small act of courage, simply sitting at the piano and playing, could leave a mark on others. By the end of the week, he found himself staring at the sky from the rooftop of his building, thinking about what was possible. Life was still challenging, still demanding, still unpredictable, but he felt a quiet confidence he hadn't felt in years. Music had reminded him of his strength, his talent, and his ability to face the world on his own terms. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to hope, not in a distant, impossible dream, but in the small, achievable moments that could shape his future. He didn't know what would come next. He didn't know if he would ever perform again in front of an audience, or if life would continue to keep him busy with deliveries and work. But he knew one thing for certain: the delivery boy who had been challenged as a joke was not the same person who had walked into that event hall. Something had awakened inside him, something that could not be silenced, something that would guide him forward whenever the world tried to dismiss him. And as he sat there, watching the city lights flicker below, he understood the truth that had been hidden from him for years. Talent and passion may be quiet. They may be hidden, and they may be overlooked, but when the right moment comes, they have the power to surprise everyone, including yourself. A few days after the event, the delivery boy found himself back at another large gathering, this time by chance rather than by delivery. A friend had invited him to help with some small errands, and he had agreed. He didn't expect anything unusual, just a normal day, nothing more. But as he entered the hall, his eyes immediately landed on a familiar sight: a grand piano shining under the lights, commanding attention at the center of the room. Memories from the last event came rushing back. He remembered the laughter, the whispers, the doubtful looks of the guests. He remembered the way the first notes he had played had turned silence into attention, and how the applause had made his heart pound with a mixture of pride and disbelief. The piano wasn't just an instrument. It was a doorway into a part of himself he had hidden for years. And now, seeing it again, he felt the familiar mix of nervousness and excitement. As he moved closer to the piano, some guests noticed him. This time, there was no joking. The previous event had been whispered about among a few circles, and some people were curious to see if the story was true. They watched quietly, trying not to draw attention, but their eyes betrayed their interest. A few of them exchanged whispers, nudging each other subtly. "Is that the delivery boy who played at the last event?" one asked. "I heard he can really play," another replied. He sat down on the bench, running his fingers lightly over the keys. The feel of the piano was familiar, almost comforting. His hands knew the shape of the keys, the way they responded to touch, the subtle differences in weight and sound. Even though he hadn't played in front of a crowd for years, his fingers remembered every movement, every scale, every note. It was as if the piano itself welcomed him back, inviting him to express what had been quietly waiting inside. At first, he hesitated. The guests were watching, some with curiosity, some with skepticism. He felt the pressure, the weight of their expectations, even though they didn't fully understand him. But he reminded himself of the feeling from the last time, the moment when music had allowed him to be himself, unafraid and unjudged. Taking a deep breath, he began to play. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost tentative, but they carried a depth that immediately drew attention. People stopped talking, their movements slowing as they turned toward him. It was not just the music itself, it was the contrast between his simple, delivery boy appearance and the richness of the sound that shocked them. The hall grew quiet, filled only with the echo of the piano and the subtle hum of curiosity. As he continued, the melody grew stronger, more confident. He played pieces he had practiced since childhood, his fingers moving naturally, without hesitation. The notes flowed smoothly, creating patterns that were both beautiful and precise. People leaned closer, eyes widening in disbelief. Some whispered to each other, unable to contain their amazement. "I can't believe this," one said softly. "He's just a delivery boy," another added, shaking their head. The music began to fill the room, touching every corner. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, it was honest, heartfelt, and alive. Each note seemed to carry a story, a memory, a piece of the delivery boy's life. The guests who had come expecting nothing were now completely captivated. Their initial skepticism vanished, replaced by admiration and a deep, almost instinctive respect for the talent before them. He noticed how the audience reacted, though he didn't let it distract him. Some faces were pale with surprise, some eyes glistened with emotion, and some people even covered their mouths, trying to hold back exclamations of amazement. The contrast between his humble appearance and the richness of his music made the performance even more powerful. It was a reminder that talent often hides in unexpected places, and that first impressions could be terribly misleading. As the piece reached its climax, the delivery boy felt a surge of energy. His fingers moved faster, more confidently, yet every note remained controlled and purposeful. The melody filled the hall completely, creating a rhythm that seemed to resonate with everyone present. People who had been chatting, laughing, or walking around moments ago were now completely still. Even those who had come with the mindset of being judgmental or dismissive could not turn away. The music commanded attention in a way that no words could. He didn't play for recognition or applause. He played because it was a part of him, because it was who he was. But as he continued, he realized something important. People were not just listening to the music. They were feeling it. The notes conveyed emotions he had carried for years: longing, hope, regret, joy, and determination. Each chord seemed to speak directly to the audience, connecting them to his story in a way that transcended words. By the time he reached the final notes, the hall was completely silent. Everyone held their breath, unwilling to break the spell. The delivery boy pressed the last key softly, letting it linger, and then slowly lifted his hands. For a moment there was nothing but stillness, a moment suspended in time. Then one person clapped. Then another. Within seconds the room erupted into applause, cheers, and exclamations of admiration. The delivery boy stood quietly, a small smile on his face. He didn't bow or draw attention to himself. He simply nodded politely, acknowledging the recognition without needing it. People approached him cautiously, some with questions, some with compliments, and some with wide-eyed admiration. "I didn't expect that at all," one guest admitted. "You're amazing," another said. "How can someone like you play like that?" He shrugged modestly. "I've loved playing since I was a child," he said simply. "Life made me take a different path for a while, but music has always been a part of me." His words were humble, but there was a quiet strength in them. People listened not just to his words but to the sincerity behind them. They realized that talent like this was rare, not because it was flashy, but because it was genuine and nurtured through years of dedication. After the applause died down, the delivery boy helped with the tasks he had been asked to do, carrying packages and assisting quietly. Yet the energy in the room had shifted. Guests who had previously ignored him now looked at him with respect. Some smiled, some nodded in acknowledgement, and a few even whispered to each other, sharing their astonishment. It was as if a small, unexpected act had changed the way they saw him and perhaps the way they saw the world. Later, as he left the hall, he thought about the contrast between the two worlds he navigated. Outside, he was a delivery boy, part of a world that demanded work, resilience, and practicality. Inside, he was a musician, capable of creating beauty and emotion with just his hands and a piano. The two identities seemed so different, yet they were both true. The challenge, the music, and the reactions of the audience reminded him that life could be full of surprises, that even small moments could have a lasting impact. He rode home through the evening streets, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. He replayed the performance in his mind, remembering the surprise on people's faces, the sudden silence and the applause that followed. It was a reminder that talent, when nurtured and expressed, could break through barriers, defy expectations, and leave a mark on the world. Even a simple act performed honestly and passionately could resonate far beyond its immediate moment. Back at his apartment, he sat quietly, thinking about what had happened. He realized that the experience had changed him, not just in confidence, but in understanding his own potential. He had been challenged as a joke, underestimated because of his appearance, and yet he had proven something important to himself and to everyone who had witnessed him. Talent is not measured by uniform or status. It is measured by dedication, heart, and courage. That night, he opened his old notebook of piano music and began to play softly. The melodies filled the small apartment, carrying with them memories of childhood, lessons learned and dreams that refused to die. The notes were not for anyone else. They were for him, a reaffirmation of who he was and what he could achieve. And as he played, he felt a quiet sense of purpose returning, a feeling that the music could guide him through challenges, offer opportunities, and connect him to the world in ways he had never imagined. He knew that life would continue to test him, that deliveries, responsibilities, and struggles would not disappear. But he also knew that moments like today reminded him of a larger truth. Talent is timeless, passion is resilient, and courage can turn even the smallest opportunity into a life-changing experience. The delivery boy understood, more clearly than ever, that music had the power to transform, to inspire, and to reveal hidden parts of people that the world often overlooked. He didn't know what would happen next, whether he would perform again in front of an audience or if another challenge would present itself. But he was ready. He was ready to embrace his talent, to nurture it, and to let it shine whenever the world gave him the chance. And as he closed his eyes, letting the final notes linger in his mind, he realized that the true magic of music was not in applause, recognition, or fame. It was in the connection it created, the hearts it touched, and the courage it inspired. He was no longer just a delivery boy. He was a musician, a storyteller through sound, and someone who had discovered the power of his own potential, one note at a time. A few days after his second performance, the delivery boy began to notice a change in how people interacted with him. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Regular customers who had barely acknowledged him before now greeted him with smiles. People at his delivery stops seemed to pay closer attention when he spoke. He carried on with his routine as he always did, delivering packages and running errands, but the air around him felt different. There was a newfound respect, a quiet acknowledgement that perhaps there was more to him than his uniform suggested. It was during one of these deliveries that the change became undeniable. He was asked to deliver a package to a large office building in the heart of the city. The lobby was filled with people rushing to meetings, carrying briefcases, and talking on their phones. At first it seemed ordinary, just another stop in his daily routine. But then he noticed a man in a sharp suit standing near the reception, watching him closely. The man's eyes were intense, curious, and even slightly skeptical. There was something about him that felt different from everyone else in the building. The man stepped forward as the delivery boy approached the reception desk. "I heard about your performances," he said calmly, yet there was an unmistakable weight in his voice. "I need to see it for myself." The delivery boy blinked. "See what?" he asked, unsure if he had understood correctly. "The piano," the man replied. "I understand you can play?" "I want to hear you play." For a moment, the delivery boy froze. This was unexpected. He was only there to deliver a package. There was no piano in the lobby, and he had not been planning to play anywhere today. But the man's gaze was steady, unyielding, and something about it made him feel both nervous and strangely confident. He nodded slowly. I can try," he said, unsure of what would happen next. A few moments later, he was led to a large conference room. At the far end sat a polished black piano, its surface gleaming under the bright overhead lights. The room was empty, save for the man in the suit, who now took a seat in the corner, watching him intently. The delivery boy approached the piano cautiously. The memories of the last two performances came rushing back: the laughter, the doubt, the eventual silence, and then the applause. He took a deep breath, placed his hands on the keys, and began to play. The first notes were gentle, almost hesitant, but they carried a depth that immediately filled the room. The sound was pure, precise, and yet infused with emotion. The man in the suit leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the piano. He was no longer judging or doubting. He was listening, completely absorbed, as if the music had reached straight into his heart. As the delivery boy continued, the melody grew stronger, more confident. His fingers moved fluidly, guided by years of practice and the passion he had nurtured quietly over time. The room seemed to transform around him. The polished walls reflected the notes, making them seem larger, fuller, almost alive. Each chord he played carried a piece of his story, his struggles, his sacrifices, and the joy he had found in music despite everything life had thrown at him. By the middle of the piece, the man in the suit was visibly moved. His posture softened, his eyes glistened slightly, and for a brief moment, he looked like a different person, someone who had been hardened by the world, but who was now touched by something pure and real. The delivery boy noticed this, but he didn't let it distract him. He played for the music, for himself, and for the moment. The room became a space where nothing else mattered. There were no packages, no errands, no uniforms, only music and connection. When the final notes lingered in the air, the delivery boy slowly lifted his hands from the keys. For a few seconds there was complete silence. The man in the suit sat back, absorbing the sound that had filled the room, and then he slowly stood. He approached the delivery boy, his expression a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "I've never heard anything like that," he said quietly. "You have a gift, and it's wasted just delivering packages." The delivery boy felt a flush of emotion but remained humble. I've always loved music," he said softly. "Life just made me take a different path for a while." The man nodded. "I understand," he replied, "but you can't let this talent stay hidden. You have something rare, something powerful. People need to hear you, and you deserve to be seen for who you are." It was the first time anyone had said those words with such conviction. It wasn't just praise, it was recognition, respect, and encouragement all in one. The delivery boy felt a mix of pride, relief, and hope. He realized that his music was not only a personal escape, but also something that could move others, even change how they saw the world. After that day, the delivery boy's life began to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. People who had doubted him before now treated him differently. Invitations to play at small gatherings, local events, and even private functions started to appear. He was still a delivery boy, still responsible for helping his family, but music was no longer something he had to hide. It had become a bridge between the life he lived and the life he dreamed of. The experience also changed the way he viewed himself. For years, he had felt defined by his responsibilities, by the uniform he wore, by the work that left little room for personal dreams. Now, he understood that identity is not just what the world sees, but also what you nurture within yourself. The music had reminded him of who he really was: a talented, passionate, and resilient person capable of inspiring others. He began to practice more intentionally, finding small pockets of time between deliveries. He would play quietly in his apartment, experimenting with new pieces, refining old melodies, and reconnecting with the joy that had first drawn him to music. Each session was a reminder that talent and passion could coexist with responsibility, and that even small efforts could lead to meaningful change. People around him began to notice this change as well. His family saw the spark returning to his eyes, the quiet confidence that had been missing for years. Friends and colleagues noticed his calm demeanor, the way he carried himself with a newfound sense of purpose. Even the people he delivered to seemed to treat him with more warmth, as if the energy he carried from his music subtly influenced every interaction. Then came the day when the man in the suit returned. He had arranged a private meeting to discuss an opportunity. He spoke carefully, explaining that he knew people in the music world who might be interested in hearing the delivery boy play. "You have something special," he said. "I can help you get noticed if you're ready." The delivery boy felt a mix of excitement and fear. It was an opportunity he had dreamed of but never dared to hope for. Stepping into the music world, performing in front of real audiences, leaving behind the safety of deliveries, it was both thrilling and terrifying. But he also understood that talent like his could not remain hidden forever. This was the moment to take a step forward, to embrace what he had always been capable of, and to see where it could lead. He agreed, cautiously but determined. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but it was made with conviction. The man in the suit smiled, sensing the resolve in him. "Good," he said. "We'll start small and see where it goes. But I promise this is only the beginning." From that day, the delivery boy's life became a delicate balance between duty and passion. He continued to deliver packages, care for his family, and live in the world he knew. But music was no longer a hidden part of him. It was active, alive, and growing. Each performance, each practice, each small moment at the piano reinforced his confidence, his identity, and his belief that talent, when nurtured, could open doors he had never imagined. He also learned an important lesson about respect and judgment. The same people who had once laughed at him, dismissed him, or treated him as ordinary were now forced to acknowledge something extraordinary. It was not just about music, it was about the human spirit, about perseverance, and about the courage to continue despite obstacles. His journey reminded him, and others who witnessed it, that appearances can be deceiving, and that potential often lies hidden in the most unexpected places. Even as the recognition grew, he remained humble. He knew that talent alone was not enough. Hard work, practice, and dedication were equally important. He played not for fame, not for applause, but for the music itself, for the stories it could tell, and for the way it connected people in moments of genuine emotion. And through every note, every chord, he began to see that his life could be more than deliveries and responsibilities. It could be a life shaped by passion, purpose, and unexpected opportunities. By the end of the week, he found himself reflecting quietly at home. The piano had changed not just how others saw him, but how he saw himself. He realized that courage was not always about grand gestures. It could be found in the willingness to play when no one expected you to take a step forward when the world doubted you, and to let your talent shine even in the smallest of moments. And as he looked out the window, listening to the distant sounds of the city. He understood something profound. The delivery boy who had once been underestimated was no longer the same person. He had been challenged, underestimated, and even doubted, yet he had turned every moment into a chance to grow, to shine, and to show the world what he was truly capable of. It had been several weeks since the delivery boy's music first captured the attention of the people at the high-class event hall. Since that first unexpected performance, his life had quietly started to change. Deliveries and errands were still a part of his daily routine, but something deeper had begun: a sense of purpose, a feeling that he was stepping into a world that had previously seemed unreachable. He had discovered that his talent was not just a private joy. It had the power to move people, to inspire them, and to open doors he had never imagined. One afternoon, he received a call from the man in the suit who had recognized his talent. The voice on the other end was calm but carried an unmistakable weight of opportunity. "There's an event tonight," the man said. "It's small, private, but influential. I think it's the perfect chance for you to play in front of people who could help you grow your music career. Are you willing?" The delivery boy paused. He felt a rush of excitement but also a wave of nervousness. This was different from the previous events. The stakes were higher, the audience more discerning, and the expectations far greater. Yet he remembered the feeling from the last few times he had played, the moment when the room fell silent. When people listen not just with their ears, but with their hearts? That feeling gave him courage. "I'll do it," he said finally, that evening. He arrived at a small, elegant venue tucked away in a quiet street. The room was warm with soft lights, comfortable chairs, and a polished black piano standing in the center. The guests arrived gradually, people who had influence in music, business, and the arts. They were dressed impeccably, their conversations polite but curious. The delivery boy felt a familiar flutter of nerves, but he pushed it aside. This was not about appearances. This was about music, and about sharing a part of himself that had always been waiting for the right moment. He approached the piano with calm determination. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, feeling the smooth surface, the familiar resistance, the weight of each note. Then, quietly, he began to play. The first notes were gentle, soft, and inviting, like a quiet whisper in a crowded room. Slowly the melody grew, unfolding with a combination of technical skill and heartfelt emotion. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the unexpected depth of the music. Some had heard of his previous performances, others had only heard rumors, but all were now witnesses to something extraordinary. The room seemed to hold its breath as the delivery boy played, each note echoing in a way that felt both intimate and grand. His music carried the story of his life, the struggles, the sacrifices, the quiet determination that had kept him going even when life seemed unfair. As the piece developed, it became clear to everyone present that this was no ordinary performance. The music was precise yet passionate, technical yet emotional. It moved from soft, gentle passages to powerful, sweeping chords that filled the room with energy and resonance. The guests could feel the story embedded in each note, even without knowing his history. There was a raw honesty in the way he played, a connection that transcended words. The delivery boy noticed subtle reactions from the audience. Some leaned forward in their chairs, eyes wide with amazement. Others had tears glistening quietly in the corners of their eyes. A few whispered to each other, unable to contain their astonishment. The contrast between his humble appearance and the extraordinary talent he displayed made the experience even more profound. The music demanded attention, respect, and admiration. As the final notes echoed through the room, there was a moment of complete stillness. No one moved, no one spoke. The delivery boy slowly lifted his hands from the keys, his heart still racing. Then, gradually, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder until the room was filled with clapping, cheering, and exclamations of amazement. People rose to their feet, some unable to contain their admiration. The delivery boy stood quietly, a small, humble smile on his face. He didn't seek the applause. It wasn't for recognition or fame. But he felt a deep sense of satisfaction, a quiet understanding that his music had touched people in a way words never could. One by one, the guests approached him. Some offered heartfelt compliments, others asked about his journey, and a few simply shook his hand, unable to speak in their awe. "This was incredible," one guest said softly. "I've never heard anything like it." Another added, "Your story makes the music even more powerful. You've truly moved us." The delivery boy nodded politely, grateful for their words yet remaining humble. "Thank you," he said. "I've loved music my whole life. It's been with me through difficult times, and I just try to express what I feel when I play." It was a defining moment. The audience, once strangers and skeptics, now saw him not as a delivery boy, but as a musician, a storyteller, and a person with extraordinary talent and resilience. For the delivery boy, it was a validation not of his skill alone, but of his journey, the struggles he had endured, the sacrifices he had made, and the courage it had taken to embrace his passion despite life's obstacles. After the event, the man in the suit pulled him aside. "You see what can happen when talent meets opportunity?" He said, "People are drawn to authenticity. They are drawn to passion. And you, my friend, have both. I think this is just the beginning for you." The delivery boy felt a mixture of pride, humility, and excitement. It was true, this was just the beginning. He had discovered that his music could open doors, change perceptions, and inspire others. But more importantly, he had rediscovered himself. Music was no longer just a memory or a private passion. It was a living, breathing part of who he was. In the days and weeks that followed, more opportunities began to appear. Invitations to play at small concerts, private events, and community gatherings came his way. He still delivered packages, still helped his family, still lived the life he knew. But music had become a bridge to something greater, a world where his talent could flourish, where he could be seen and appreciated for who he truly was. Every time he performed, he carried the lessons of his journey with him. He remembered the laughter and doubt of the first event, the surprise and respect of the second, and the quiet encouragement from the man in the suit. Each performance reminded him that talent alone is not enough. Courage, dedication, and the willingness to seize opportunities are equally important. He played with authenticity, with emotion, and with the understanding that music has the power to touch hearts and change lives. He also began to understand the impact he had on others. People who had doubted or dismissed him learned a lesson about humility and respect. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers saw that appearances can be misleading, that hidden talent exists everywhere, and that the human spirit can overcome obstacles in extraordinary ways. His story became a quiet inspiration, a reminder that passion and perseverance can create opportunities when least expected. At home, he continued to practice and explore new melodies. Music had become both a refuge and a source of empowerment. Each note reminded him of his journey, his struggles, and the courage it had taken to embrace his talent. It was a reminder that life may place challenges in one's path, but those challenges can be stepping stones to growth, discovery, and unexpected success. Eventually, he began to dream bigger. He imagined performing on larger stages, sharing his music with wider audiences, and connecting with people from all walks of life. He knew it wouldn't be easy, and he knew there would be obstacles along the way. But he also knew that the moment he had been challenged as a joke, and the moments that followed had prepared him for this journey. He had proven to himself that talent combined with courage could create remarkable opportunities, and so, the delivery boy who had once been underestimated, judged, and overlooked had transformed. He was no longer just a young man carrying packages through city streets. He was a musician, a storyteller, and a person who had discovered the extraordinary potential within himself. He had learned that life's unexpected moments can become turning points, that hidden talent can shine when given the chance, and that true success comes from embracing who you are and sharing it with the world. As he sat at the piano late one evening, playing softly for himself, he reflected on his journey. From the first challenge posed as a joke, to the astonishment of audiences, to the respect and recognition he was now receiving, it had been a remarkable transformation. Yet for him, the true reward was not the applause, not the opportunities, and not the admiration. It was the simple, undeniable truth that he had reclaimed a part of himself, a part that had never truly disappeared, and that he could continue to grow, create, and inspire. In the quiet of his apartment, the notes floated through the air, carrying the story of his life of struggle, courage, talent, and hope. And for anyone listening, it was clear: greatness often comes from the most unexpected places, and a single moment, embraced with heart and determination, can change everything. The delivery boy smiled softly, feeling at peace. He had been challenged, underestimated, and doubted, but he had risen above it, not with arrogance, not with force, but with passion, dedication, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are. And as the music filled the room, he understood that this was only the beginning of a life defined by courage, talent, and the power of never giving up on your dreams.